Ma'am, step away from the vehicle now. The command cut through the afternoon air like a blade, sharp enough to make nearby conversations die mid-sentence as the parking lot fell into a strange, suspended quiet. Carts half-pushed, engines idling, people watching but not moving, and Alicia Brooks stood there with a paper grocery bag pressed lightly against her hip, the weight of it familiar, grounding, a loaf of bread, a carton of eggs, a small bottle of orange juice. Normal things, ordinary things, yet nothing about this moment felt ordinary as two ICE agents approached with the kind of confidence that didn't ask questions, only issued conclusions, their boots steady against the asphalt, their eyes already decided, already certain, and Alicia didn't step back, didn't raise her voice, didn't do anything that matched the tension building around her. She just turned slowly, her gaze level, calm in a way that didn't fit the script unfolding in front of her. Her hoodie slightly wrinkled from a long day, her sneakers worn but clean, her posture relaxed but not careless, as if she were standing in a place she understood better than anyone else here. And one of the agents, a tall white man with a rigid jaw and a badge catching the late sunlight, gestured toward her hands. "Keep them where I can see them," his tone practiced, clipped, already moving forward, already closing distance, while the second agent circled slightly, creating space that felt less like procedure and more like control. And somewhere behind Alicia, a child's voice wavered, soft and uncertain. "Mom," and that sound lingered in the air longer than it should have, stretching the moment, bending it, but Alicia didn't turn toward it. Not yet. Her eyes remained on the agent in front of her, studying, measuring, not with fear, but with something quieter, something sharper, like she was reading a situation that others were only reacting to. Her fingers loosening slightly around the paper bag as one corner dipped and brushed against her leg. And the agent took that small movement as confirmation of something he had already decided, stepping closer, his hand hovering near her wrist, not touching, not yet, but ready, always ready, and around them the parking lot held its breath. A woman paused beside her car door. A man froze mid-step with his phone half raised, the hum of a distant engine filling the silence that no one dared break. And Alicia inhaled slowly, the kind of breath that didn't signal panic but preparation, her shoulders settling, not shrinking, not stiffening, just aligning, as if something inside her had clicked into place, something old, something trained, something deeply controlled. And when she finally spoke, her voice wasn't loud, wasn't defensive, wasn't anything the agents expected. It was steady, almost quiet. "You're making a mistake," she said, not as a plea, not as a protest, but as a statement, simple and grounded, like she was describing the weather, and the agent's lips pressed into something close to a smile. Not amused, not kind, just dismissive, the kind that comes from years of believing you're always right. And he moved closer anyway, closing that last inch of space, unaware that the calm in front of him wasn't submission, wasn't fear, but something far more dangerous to his certainty, something he hadn't even begun to recognize yet. The agent's fingers closed around Alicia's wrist, not harsh, not hesitant, just certain, as if the outcome had already been written somewhere she had never seen, and the paper bag slipped a fraction lower in her grip, the thin brown edge bending under the weight, until one of the eggs inside shifted with a soft, hollow knock that seemed louder than it should have been in the stillness. And Alicia let out a slow breath through her nose, her gaze dropping for just a second to the asphalt beneath. Her shoes were faint oil stains spread like shadows across the faded white lines of the parking space. Grounding details, small things most people ignored, but she noticed instinctively, cataloging without effort, the distance between the two agents, the angle of the sun reflecting off the windshield of a nearby pickup truck, the way the second agent's stance leaned slightly to his left side, subtle imbalances, quiet patterns. And behind her the child's voice came again, closer this time, trembling but trying to be brave. "Mom, what is happening?" And Alicia's shoulders softened at the sound, not collapsing, not weakening, just shifting, a human response threading through the discipline she carried, as she turned her head just enough to see him standing a few feet away near the shopping cart, small hands gripping the metal handle, eyes wide, searching her face for something steady, something safe. and she gave him a look, brief but clear, the kind of look that did not explain, but reassured, that said without words that he needed to stay where he was, that everything was under control, even if it did not look like it. And the agent followed her line of sight, glancing at the child for half a second before dismissing him entirely, as if he were just another background detail, another irrelevant piece of the scene. And that dismissal lingered heavier than the grip on her wrist, because it revealed more than the badge ever could. It revealed what he saw and what he chose not to see. And Alicia turned her attention back to him, her voice low but steady. "My identification is in my pocket," she said, each word measured, deliberate, offered not as compliance, but as clarity, and the agent shook his head slightly, already moving to guide her toward the dark SUV, idling a few yards away, its engine humming softly, patient, waiting. "We will sort that out," he replied, the phrase automatic, practiced, something he had said countless times before, and Alicia did not resist the motion, her feet shifting with controlled precision, her balance centered, her body following without surrendering, a distinction invisible to anyone not trained to see it. And the second agent stepped closer now, tightening the space around her, reinforcing the narrative they had already decided was true, and Alicia felt the weight of that assumption press in from all sides. Not new, not surprising, but familiar in a way that had shaped years of her life, years of watching people look at her and decide what she was before she ever spoke, before she ever moved, before they ever considered the possibility that they might be wrong. And the grocery bag slipped again, one corner tearing slightly under the strain, the cardboard carton inside, shifting once more, fragile things held together by thin material. And Alicia tightened her grip just enough to keep it from falling apart completely. Because even now, even here, she was not careless with what she carried. And as the agents guided her forward, step by step toward the vehicle, the parking lot seemed to narrow, the distance stretching and compressing at the same time, every sound sharpened, every movement slowed, and Alicia's breathing remained steady, controlled, each inhale measured, each exhale deliberate, the rhythm of someone who had learned long ago how to stay calm when everything around her tried to force a different reaction. And for a brief moment, as her eyes flicked once more toward her son, she made a choice, not out of fear, not out of submission, but out of something deeper, something rooted in protection, because she could act now, she could end this in a heartbeat, but she did not. Not yet, because the cost of that moment would not fall on her alone. And so, she let them believe they were in control. She let them continue. And the silence that followed was not empty. It was waiting. The dark SUV idled ahead of them, its tinted windows reflecting a warped version of the scene, shapes bending under the glass. The world outside reduced to shadows and fragments. And Alicia's steps remained steady as they moved closer, each footfall measured against the low hum of the engine and the distant echo of a cart rolling somewhere behind her, a sound that felt strangely out of place now, too normal for what this moment had become. And the agent beside her tightened his grip, just slightly, as if to remind her of the direction she was expected to follow. But Alicia's posture did not change, her shoulders aligned, her center balanced, the quiet composure of someone who understood space, timing, and consequence in ways that could not be seen from the outside. And as they reached the rear door, the second agent moved ahead to open it, his hand pulling the handle with a smooth, practiced motion, revealing the dark interior, controlled, contained, designed to take people from one place to another without question, without pause. And Alicia's gaze flicked briefly to the edge of the door frame, noting the angle, the distance, the position of both men relative to her, details stacking in her mind without effort, not because she was planning something reckless, but because she had been trained never to stop seeing, never to stop understanding the environment she stood in. And behind her the child's footsteps approached, uneven but determined, closing the distance. Despite the tension in the air, "Mom, do not go," he said, his voice small but carrying, cutting through the controlled silence in a way nothing else had. And Alicia turned her head again, this time fully, her eyes softening just for a moment as they met. A quiet exchange passing between them, reassurance without explanation, strength without display. And the agent nearest to her exhaled sharply, impatience creeping into his posture. "Sir, stay back," he said, not looking at the boy, not truly seeing him, just pushing the moment forward, pushing everything forward because that was what he knew how to do. And Alicia felt that shift, that narrowing of focus, that refusal to pause and reassess, and it settled into her like a weight she had carried before, not new, not surprising, but still heavy in its implications. And she turned back toward the open door, her reflection faintly visible in the dark glass, distorted but still recognizable. A woman in a hoodie holding a torn paper bag, a woman being guided into a vehicle by two agents who believed they understood exactly who she was, and Alicia's fingers adjusted slightly on the bag, steadying it once more as a thin crack spread along the folded edge, the carton inside shifting. Again, fragile things under pressure, and her breathing remained even controlled, each inhale grounding her, each exhale releasing tension without letting it escape into movement, and the agent gestured toward the seat inside. "Get in," he said, the words final, unquestioned, and Alicia paused for a fraction of a second, not resisting, not complying fully either, just existing in that narrow space between action and decision, where everything could still change, where every outcome still waited. And in that brief pause, the world seemed to hold its breath again, the parking lot silent except for the low engine hum and the distant call of a bird overhead, and Alicia's eyes shifted once more, not to the agents this time, but to the reflection in the glass, to the image they had already decided was real, and something in her expression changed, not outwardly, not in a way anyone watching would immediately notice, but internally, a subtle alignment, a quiet readiness, like a switch, being acknowledged rather than flipped. And when she finally moved, it was with the same calm precision she had held from the beginning, stepping forward just enough to meet the expectation placed on her, while something deeper remained untouched, unseen, and completely her own. The interior of the SUV waited in silence, dark fabric seats absorbing the late afternoon light as Alicia stepped just close enough for the shadow to fall across her shoes, the edge of the door frame cool against the back of her hand. And for a moment, nothing moved, not the agents, not the onlookers, not even the air itself, as if the entire scene had narrowed down to a single point of decision that only she could feel, and Alicia let her gaze drift once more, not hurried, not nervous, just precise, taking into reflection of the parking lot stretched across the vehicle's glossy surface, the faint outline of her son standing a few feet away, small but steady, the agents positioned on either side of her, their attention fixed on control rather than awareness, and she shifted her weight slightly, a subtle adjustment that meant nothing to anyone watching, but to her was everything, a recalibration, a return to center, and her fingers tightened gently around the torn paper bag as she lowered it toward the ground, not dropping it, not letting it spill, just placing it carefully beside the rear tire, the carton inside, settling with a soft sound that echoed louder than it should have, and the agent nearest her frowned, a flicker of irritation crossing his face as if a simple act of setting something down had disrupted the flow he expected. "Leave it," he said, his voice firm, but Alicia did not respond, not immediately, her attention still anchored in the moment she was creating, not the one being forced upon her. And when she finally straightened, her hands empty now, free, her posture did not change in any dramatic way. There was no sudden tension, no visible shift that would signal what was coming. Only a quiet stillness that settled over her like a second skin, and the second agent stepped closer, narrowing the space again, reinforcing the assumption that proximity equaled control, and Alicia felt the weight of that closeness, not as pressure, but as information, distance measured, timing understood, options unfolding silently in her mind. And behind her the child's voice came again, softer this time, almost, a whisper carried by the breeze, "Mom, please," and that word lingered, stretching across the space between them. And Alicia closed her eyes for a fraction of a second, not in hesitation, not in fear, but in acknowledgement, a single breath drawn deeper than the ones before it, filling her lungs, steadying her pulse, aligning every part of her with something that had been trained, repeated, ingrained over years that no one here could see. And when her eyes opened again, they were the same on the surface, calm, controlled, unreadable, but something beneath had shifted, something quiet and absolute, and the agent gestured once more toward the open seat, impatience now threading through his movements. "Get in," he repeated, the words sharper this time, expecting compliance, expecting the moment to resolve the way it always had. But Alicia did not move forward, not into the vehicle. Instead, she turned slightly, just enough to face him more directly, her gaze meeting his without challenge, without fear, simply present. And for a brief second, something unfamiliar passed between them, something he could not immediately name. Not resistance, not aggression, just a presence that did not fit into the frame he had already constructed. And that uncertainty flickered and vanished just as quickly, replaced by the same rigid certainty he carried, because it was easier to hold onto what he believed than to question it. And Alicia let the silence stretch, not forcing it, not breaking it, just allowing it to exist long enough for the weight of it to settle, for the imbalance of the moment to become undeniable, even if no one acknowledged it out loud. And then, without raising her voice, without changing her tone, she spoke again. "You are still making a mistake," she said, each word even, controlled, and the statement did not sound like a warning. It sounded like truth, simple and unshaken. And the agent's jaw tightened, his patience thinning, his grip shifting slightly as he prepared to move things along, to end the pause, to reassert the control he believed he had never lost. But Alicia remained exactly where she was, grounded, centered, waiting, not for permission, not for opportunity, but for the exact moment when everything would align, when action would no longer be a choice, but a necessity, and that moment was closer than anyone realized. The agent's hand shifted again, firmer this time, guiding rather than asking, his patience thinning into something sharper, something that needed the moment to end the way he had already decided it would. And Alicia felt that change immediately, not in the pressure itself, but in the intention behind it, the subtle transition from assumption to enforcement, and the space around her tightened as the second agent stepped in closer, closing the last gap, their presence forming a narrow corridor that led only in one direction, toward the open door of the SUV, toward the outcome they had already written. And Alicia did not resist, not outwardly, her body moving just enough to follow the motion without surrendering control, her steps small, precise, each one placed with intention rather than reaction. And the asphalt beneath her shoes felt steady, familiar, grounding her in a way that no external force could disrupt. And behind her the sound of quick footsteps broke through the silence, lighter, uneven, urgent, and before anyone could react, the child moved closer, his small frame slipping past the edge of the scene that had tried to ignore him. "Stop," he said, his voice shaking but determined, reaching toward Alicia as if proximity alone could anchor her in place. And the nearest agent turned sharply, his arm extending instinctively to block the child's path. Not rough, not violent, just dismissive, redirecting him away from something he did not believe the boy had any right to be part of. In that moment, that small redirection landed heavier than anything else that had happened, because it was not about control anymore. It was about erasure, about deciding who mattered in the space and who did not. And Alicia saw it clearly, felt it settle into something deeper than the situation itself, something older, something that had repeated in different forms for years. And her gaze shifted to her son, just for a second, long enough to see the confusion in his eyes, the uncertainty, the way he searched her face for something that would make sense of what he was witnessing. And Alicia's chest rose with a deeper breath, slower this time, deliberate, her shoulders relaxing not out of surrender, but out of preparation. And the world around her seemed to narrow again, the edges of the parking lot fading, the distant sounds dulling into a low hum as her focus sharpened, every detail aligning into a single, clear awareness, the position of each person, the rhythm of their movements, the timing of their reactions. And the agent nearest her misread the stillness completely, mistaking it for compliance, for resignation, his grip shifting once more as he prepared to move her forward that final step into the vehicle. "We are done here," he said, his voice firm, closing the moment with the authority he believed he held. And Alicia let the words pass without response, her body still, her breathing steady, the quiet before something that had been held back for too long. And for the first time since this began, the balance of the situation shifted, not outwardly, not in a way anyone could immediately see, but internally, completely. And Alicia's eyes lifted, not to challenge, not to confront, but to meet his with a calm that no longer carried restraint, only certainty. And in that silent exchange, something unspoken passed between them, something he could not fully understand but instinctively felt, a disruption in the control he thought was absolute. And the moment stretched, thin and fragile, as if it could break in any direction. And Alicia knew exactly when it would, not because she forced it, but because she recognized it. The precise point where waiting was no longer protection, where stillness no longer served its purpose, and everything that followed would not be reaction, but decision. The moment did not break all at once. It thinned first, stretched so tight it felt like even the air might tear if anyone moved too quickly. And Alicia stood in that fragile space with a stillness that no longer belonged to the situation around her, but to something deeper, something she carried within herself, her breathing slow, measured, each inhale filling her chest with quiet control, each exhale releasing everything that did not matter. And the noise of the parking lot faded further. The distant engines, the rustle of movement, even the soft shuffle of feet becoming muted, as if the world had stepped back and left only what was essential. And Alicia's focus narrowed, not to the agents, not to the vehicle, but inward, to the steady rhythm she had relied on long before this moment ever existed, a rhythm built through repetition, discipline, and years of learning how to remain present when everything around her demanded reaction. And her fingers flexed once at her side, not a signal, not a threat, just a quiet acknowledgement of readiness. And the sunlight shifted slightly across the surface of the SUV, reflecting a thin line of brightness that moved across her face and disappeared, marking time in a way no one else noticed. And behind her, the sound of her son's breathing reached her, uneven but trying to steady itself. And that sound grounded her more than anything else could, anchoring her in purpose rather than emotion. And she did not turn this time. She did not need to, because she already knew where he stood, already knew what he needed. And the agent closest to her shifted his weight again, impatience building, his presence pressing forward without understanding that the moment he thought he controlled had already moved beyond him. And Alicia's eyes lowered briefly, not in submission, but in clarity, tracing the edge of the asphalt, the faint crack running between two parking lines, a small imperfection in an otherwise flat surface, something most people would never notice, but to her was a point, a marker, a place where focus could settle completely. And her shoulders dropped a fraction, releasing the last visible trace of tension, her posture aligning into something effortless, something natural. And the silence deepened, not empty, but full, carrying the weight of everything that had led to this exact second. And Alicia drew one final breath, deeper than the rest, slower, deliberate, and held it for just a fraction longer, allowing every detail to lock into place, the distance, the angles, the timing, the presence of each person in the space around her. And when she released it, the world did not rush back in. It remained still, suspended, waiting. And Alicia did not move immediately. She did not rush, because there was no need. The moment had already arrived, not forced, not created, but recognized. And in that recognition, everything became simple, not easy, but clear. And her gaze lifted again, calm, steady, meeting the agent's eyes one last time, not to challenge, not to prove anything, but to confirm what he had failed to see from the beginning. And in that quiet exchange, there was no anger, no fear, only certainty. And for the briefest second, something shifted in his expression, something uncertain, something unsteady as If a small part of him realized that the situation he believed he understood had never truly belonged to him at all, and Alicia remained exactly where she was, grounded, composed, and completely ready for what came next. It happened in the space between two breaths, so quiet that no one could point to the exact second it began, only that something had shifted, something undeniable, and Alicia moved. Not fast in the way people expected, not rushed or chaotic, but precise, controlled, each motion flowing into the next with a clarity that made it almost invisible to the untrained eye, her wrist turning just enough to release the grip that had seemed so certain a moment before, her body pivoting slightly to reclaim the space that had been taken from her, not with force, but with understanding, with timing. And the agents reacted a fraction too late, their movements no longer leading the moment, but chasing it, trying to catch up to something they had already lost control of. And Alicia stepped back in her own balance, her posture unchanged, her breathing steady, as if she had simply repositioned herself rather than altered the entire dynamic of the situation. And the parking lot, once frozen in passive observation, shifted into something else, not chaos, not panic, but awareness, people leaning forward slightly, eyes widening, phones lowering as confusion replaced certainty, because what they were seeing did not match what they had expected, and Alicia did not escalate, did not push, did not create anything beyond what was necessary to stand where she now stood, free from the hold that had defined the moment before. And the agents paused, their confidence interrupted, their understanding fractured, one of them stepping back instinctively, recalibrating, his eyes scanning her not as a subject now, but as an unknown variable, something that required reassessment. And Alicia's gaze remained steady, not aggressive, not defensive, simply present, her hands relaxed at her sides, open, unthreatening, yet undeniably in control of herself and the space around her. And the silence returned, heavier this time, carrying the weight of what had just happened, because it had not been loud, it had not been dramatic, but had changed everything. And the first agent's voice came slower now, less certain. What are you doing?" he asked, the question revealing more than the words themselves, revealing the gap between what he thought he understood and what was now in front of him. And Alicia did not answer immediately. She did not rush to explain, because the moment did not require explanation, it required recognition, and she reached calmly toward the inside pocket of her hoodie, her movement deliberate, visible, giving them time to see, to process, to understand that this was not escalation, not threat, but clarity. And she withdrew a small, worn leather case, flipping it open with a quiet, practiced motion, revealing an identification card that caught the light just enough to be seen clearly, and she held it steady at chest level, not pushing it forward, not forcing it into their space, simply presenting it, allowing the truth to exist where assumption had been. And the agent's eyes dropped to it, his focus narrowing as he read, his posture shifting again, not from authority this time, but from realization, the kind that settles slowly and all at once. And the air seemed to change around them, the weight of the moment redistributing, and Alicia's voice, when she finally spoke, was the same as it had been from the beginning, calm, even grounded. "I told you," she said quietly, not as a challenge, not as a correction, but as a statement of fact. "You were making a mistake." And this time, the words did not pass unnoticed. They landed, fully, undeniably, and nothing about the moment looked the same anymore. The identification remained steady in Alicia's hand, not pushed forward, not withdrawn, just present. And the agent's eyes stayed locked on it longer than they should have, as if reading it once was not enough, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something that made more sense to him. But they did not. They stayed exactly as they were, clear, official, undeniable. And the certainty that had carried him through every step of this encounter began to thin, not disappearing all at once, but cracking in small, quiet ways that showed in the slight shift of his posture, the way his shoulders lost their rigid edge, the way his grip, once firm and unquestioned, had already released without him fully realizing it. And the second agent leaned in just enough to see, his expression tightening as he read over the same details, his breath catching for a fraction of a second before he straightened again, slower this time, more careful. And the space around Alicia changed, not physically, but in presence, the invisible boundary that had been forced onto her dissolving as quickly as it had been created, and no one spoke immediately, because there was nothing to say that would restore what had already shifted, the authority that had seemed absolute, now standing on something far less stable. And Alicia closed the leather case. With a soft click, the sound quiet but final, and lowered her hand back to her side, not making a show of it, not holding on to the moment, just letting it settle naturally. And the first agent cleared his throat, the sound sharper than he intended, betraying the recalibration happening beneath the surface. "Ma'am, we need to verify this," he said, his voice no longer carrying the same weight, the edges of it uncertain. Searching for footing, and Alicia met his gaze again, her expression unchanged, not cold, not forgiving, simply steady. "You should have done that before," she replied, her tone even, without accusation, without emphasis, just truth laid plainly in front of him. And the words landed heavier than any raised voice could have, because they were not meant to wound, they were meant to be understood. And the agent nodded once, almost automatically, his mind already moving through the implications of what had happened, the steps that had been skipped, the assumptions that had been made, the line that had been crossed without hesitation. And behind Alicia, the tension in the air shifted again as the child took a cautious step closer, no longer blocked, no longer dismissed, his small hand reaching for hers. And Alicia let her fingers curl gently around his, grounding him with a simple, familiar touch, her posture softening just slightly, not losing control, but allowing a different kind of presence to emerge, one that had always been there beneath the discipline. And the second agent stepped back now, creating space instead of taking it, his eyes moving between Alicia and his partner, a silent acknowledgement passing between them that did not need words. And the SUV, once a destination, now stood as an unused backdrop, its engine still running, its doors still open, but no longer part of the outcome. And the parking lot, which had held its breath through every moment, began to exhale slowly, the quiet shifting into low murmurs, people processing what they had witnessed, not fully understanding it, but recognizing that something important had just occurred. And Alicia did not look around, did not seek their attention, her focus remaining exactly where it needed to be, present, grounded. And the first agent finally stepped back as well, a clear break from the position he had held before, his voice lower now, measured. "We apologize for the inconvenience," he said, the words formal, practiced, but lacking the certainty they once carried. And Alicia held his gaze for a moment longer, not to prolong the discomfort, not to demand anything more, but to let the moment settle fully into its truth. And when she spoke again, her voice was quiet, but it carried. "Next time," she said, pausing just long enough for the weight of it to register, "see people before you decide what they are." And then she turned, not abruptly, not dramatically, just naturally, her hand still holding her son's as she stepped away from the space that had tried to define her, leaving behind nothing but the silence of realization. The sound of her footsteps faded into the rhythm of the parking lot returning to life, slow at first, then gradually filling in the silence that had held everything in place just moments before. Engines starting, doors closing, conversations resuming in low, uncertain tones. And Alicia did not look back, not at the agents, not at the SUV, not at the people who were still watching her as she walked away with the same calm, steady pace she had carried from the beginning, her son's hand small in hers, his grip tightening and loosening as if he was still trying to understand what had just happened. And the torn paper bag rested near the rear tire where she had left it, forgotten for a moment in the weight of everything else, until she paused just briefly, her steps slowing as she turned back only far enough to retrieve it, bending slightly to lift it with care, her fingers adjusting around the weakened edges so nothing inside would fall, the simple act grounding, ordinary, real. And when she straightened again, the sunlight caught along the side of her face, soft, warm, unchanged by anything that had just taken place. And she resumed walking, not hurried, not delayed, just steady, moving toward the far end of the lot where a car waited. And beside her, her son finally spoke again, his voice quieter now, less afraid, more curious. "Mom, are you okay?" And Alicia glanced down at him, her expression softening in a way that had not been visible before. A small, reassuring smile forming without effort. "I am," she said gently, her voice calm, steady, the same tone that had carried her through every moment of the encounter. And he nodded, absorbing that answer in the simple way children do, accepting it not because he understood everything, but because he trusted her. And the distance between them and the agents grew with each step, the figures behind them becoming smaller, less defined, until they were no longer part of the moment at all, just shapes left behind in a scene that had already moved on. And the SUV door remained open for a few seconds longer before one of the agents reached out and closed it slowly, the sound muted, almost hesitant, as if even that simple action now required more thought than it had before. And the engine idled a moment longer before being turned off, the low hum disappearing into the broader noise of the day. And Alicia reached her car, unlocking it with a quiet click, opening the passenger door for her son first, guiding him inside with a gentle hand before placing the bag carefully on the seat beside him, checking it once more to make sure nothing had broken, nothing had been lost. And then she closed the door, walking around to the driver's side, her movements unhurried, precise, as if nothing about her pace needed to change to prove anything to anyone. And when she sat behind the wheel, her hands rested on it for a moment before starting the engine, the familiar vibration grounding her once again, and she exhaled softly, not releasing tension, but acknowledging the moment had passed. And as she pulled out of the parking space, merging back into the flow of traffic beyond the lot, the world continued exactly